The onSecurity podcast aims to inform and challenge the viewer on all things cybersecurity. Our sponsor, Onshore Security, is a premier provider of full telemetry cybersecurity detection via its Panoptic Cyber Defense Service and managed security solutions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stel, CEO of Onshore Security, and welcome to the newest episode of the Onshore Security podcast. And with me is actually a good friend, somebody we've been around the block with, a few times before, Edward Marchewka of 3LC Solutions, founder. Ed, want to say hi?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Stel. This is I'm looking forward to this discussion here.
Oh, awesome. Me too. And always thank you, Josh Ecklow, our producer. Say hi, Josh. Great. And, it's been a kind of I don't want to say a long time coming, but for a while, because we play in the same circles, at Edward, and we've so many discussions we've had, and, of course, revolving around metrics and whatnot. But you absolutely intrigued me in the point you made about, and you just told me now that you actually gave a talk at Camp about it. This qualitative versus quantitative metrics. I mean, you live and breathe the metric space, and I'll give you a shot to say, please tell us a bit what you do, so we know that context. We know you're bringing the right experience to the table. But this is really intriguing: qualitative versus quantitative. What's the dream? What's the reality? What are the things that people could kind of start thinking about there? So give us a bit of background, and then let's get into the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Edward Marchewka, founder of 3LC Solutions, created 3LC Solutions to help people tell a better story, find a way to connect InfoSec to the business. And so really diving into metrics and trying to find that way, I just love this. And in fact, did my dissertation in the space for cybersecurity risk communications, looking at different types of metrics and the way that they're perceived. And actually, the end of the study was that your risk presentation format didn't matter. Risk perception between either CISOs or executives were actually the same. It's all about the story that you tell in the back end and how you connect it back. And I'll give an example. So you asked the question, what's the ideal? And I think a lot of the research will show you that the ideal is quantitative risk assessment. And there's a whole bunch in there. It's a lot more accurate, statistically significant, but sometimes the business doesn't matter. I have presented myself, built the business case, built the financial impact, did the ROI statement, showed good net present value, positive internal rate of return. And the CFO was on board with it. And you're like, yep, you won. And then the CEO goes, yeah, but how can we save more lives with this? Wait, what? No, this is a sound financial decision. I presented the quantitative data that the industry is telling me I have to do. They didn't say connect it back to the mission, which is to save more lives. Because it wasn't a question of if I have $100,000 and I invest it or use it somewhere else, I'm going to get that internal rate of return. That's what we've been trained to do through business school. I presented that argument. If you're going to take the $100,000, you give it to me, I'm going to give you a better rate of return. The question was, if I take that $100,000, can I save more lives? Not, can I get a better? I was like, oh, we ended up doing the project anyways, but it changed the future projects because now I had to go to more of a qualitative mission approach than actual pure quantitative financial. And that's the other thing. So quantitative is usually and almost always business terms. It's financial. It's not. The research will say, and there's plenty of articles to support it, business terms is not financial or accounting, unless that is the business that you're in. If you're in banking and finance, it's banking and finance. There's no way around it. If you're in healthcare, it's patient outcomes, which you could say, well, that's financial. They'll pay their bills. Well, no, no one cares. It's patient safety. It's survivability. It's did they leave the hospital and not come back? Education, it's student outcomes. You know how many schools run a deficit? They don't care about the fight. I mean, they care about the financials, but come on. It's student outcomes and how good they're doing. What's the impact? I was just talking to the CISO for a college yesterday. They care about how can we educate more people? How can we get them through our college? Your compliance program or your security program, how is it going to help our students? Not whatever, financial return. No, it's about
right.
that is the language of your business. So when we hear speak in business terms, what is the business that you're in? And so that's the balance between qual and quant. I don't think it's a versus. I think it's an and. The problem with qual and quant is people don't use the tools correctly. To a person with a hammer, everything's a nail. And I actually illustrated this yesterday at a conference. I took out a block of wood, some nails, and some screws, and I had a 16 penny nail and a trim hammer. It didn't go in very well. So I had a 3-pound sledge next to me, and that nail went right through. Better hammer, better tool. Then I took a drywall nail or screw, put it through with the trim hammer. It went through just fine because it's a very sharp, pointed, and it's angled right, and you can drive it through soft pine. But then I took a different screw with a T20 tip on it. It wouldn't drive very well with the hammer. Guess what else it didn't drive well with? A Phillips head. A PH number 2 doesn't drive a T20. Had to change the tip. So now I'm getting into better use of the tool. It takes a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of training to use the drill with a T20. And then what we saw was that when you just drilled it in, there was wood splintering. It came back up when you drove this drill in, when you drilled the screw in.
Yeah.
So I said, let's do this. Let's get the perfect scenario. I took out a small bit and I drilled a pilot hole. And then I screwed the screw in. Tell you what, that thing went in beautifully, no splintering. It was great. And so I went from a hammer to a drill with a pilot hole, and it's using the right tool for the job. And when we're doing risk assessment, qual versus quant, it's using the tools appropriately.
This is really an epiphany for me because, and I'm not sure where I get it from, to be honest with you, but to me, the dream, would be quantitative. And you're saying the dream, the ideal is qualitative. And the tool metaphor you're using is kind of scaring me a bit as much as it's exciting me, which is, wait a minute, no, there's complexity. The nuance creates complexity. Make it simple for me. Please tell me the ideal is attainable. Tell me that I can figure out these tools and use them.
The ideal is using the right tool at the right time. That's the ideal. It's not
quant.
It's not quant. It's both, in my opinion. So
Gotcha.
An often cited article is the Cox 2008 article about risk matrices, where Cox says that risk matrices are worse than useless. And then he's citing his own work from 2007. It's the Cox and Popkin article from 2007, where they define that it's not necessarily worse than useless, but it's worse than random guessing. Now, part of the study goes into say that like they're referencing a 2x2 matrix. Well, nobody uses a 2x2 risk matrix to do any sort of intelligence. The other piece of that is against the risk matrices is that when you're multiplying them, you're multiplying probability distributions. And so you end up with these curves that have overlapping categories. And one of Cox's lemmas is that anything that's negatively correlated, you need further analysis. The only thing that the risk matrix is good for is identifying the two extremes, the things that are good and the things that are bad. Everything else in between needs further analysis, and that's where people run into issues. Okay, when we first go into an organization as 3LC Solutions, we're going to do, and I know I'm going to catch some flack for this, we're going to do a qualitative risk assessment because I want to know two things. I want to know what's not on fire, and I want to know what is on fire. And the argument to that is everything that is on fire is obvious. If it was obvious, it wouldn't be on fire. It wouldn't be an issue. And so we can very quickly get through 140 tactical metrics going, yep, that's on fire. Nope, that's not. It's the forest fire situation. You're in California, you're sipping wine in Napa Valley, and suddenly a forest fire breaks out, and you've got to escape. You're driving down the road, and you hit a wall of smoke. And you've got two decisions to make. You can turn left where there's no fire. Actually, you got three. Turn left, no fire. You can go straight where there's smoke, and you can go right where there's fire.
Okay.
Now get out your calculator and have a nice discussion about which way you should go. Or just turn left, right? Because there's no fire. You're not even going to take the approach of, well, I'll go into the fire. I'll go into the smoke. No. Look, this is the approach. When the firefighters are going in to attack this situation, what are they going to do? Where there is fire, they're going to take a helicopter or a big-ass plane and they're going to dump water all over it. Because they know where the fire is. What are they going to do for the smoke? They're going to drive in slowly with a team and put out where the fires are. They're just not going to dump water on it because they have to do analysis. You have to dive into it. And then they're going to leave everything alone where there isn't fire because you don't need to worry about it. And I think that's what we're missing with these tools is we're not using them properly.
Well, I want, okay, enough of the metaphors. I want give me a real, I mean, your own experience, real world, you don't have to name names, but real world example of that, the smoke, the fire, the clear, and how that was navigated, how tools were used to, that.
Okay. Real case example.
Yeah.
So we'll evaluate three things, right? And so first you evaluate if they're using 2FA, right? And they are. And you say, yep, you're using 2FA multi-factor authentication. I would consider that not on fire. That's probably pretty good. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to look at backup percentages. First pass backup percentage is 90%. I'm going to put that in the smoke category.
Okay.
Because I have to evaluate whether or not that's good, that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to look at your patching cadences. And you haven't. Okay, that to me, as a practitioner, that's on fire. That is like, we need to figure out how to get these systems updated because we have exposed systems where we need to start doing that. And that's an obvious thing. And so the first thing I'm going to do is not worry about the 2FA piece. And I'm going to figure out how we can patch our systems. Now that first pass backup percentage, that's where you go, well, wait a minute, maybe that is on fire. But is it? Is it expose the internet? No. If we lose the backups, we're going to lose 10%, right? You're not going to lose everything. And so that's where I would take that approach of what do I need to do first? And I can do further analysis on that backup percentage and say, what is the risk to the business from a quantitative perspective? And I can balance the time and effort, time, people, and money, those resources to address that concern. I think that's the real life practical example there.
So yeah, no, for sure, but like so apply the qualitative perspective to that 90% backup. Like, how do I determine to what degree that's good and bad? I mean, 90% is a number, but your point is like that's not good enough. I need to have qualitative analysis. What does that mean? Is it a certain 10% that's not being backed up?
No. So at that point. Mm-hmm. Because it hasn't boiled up to the extreme of this is on fire, we can't use qualitative at that point. Now you dive into it and you evaluate it from a quantitative perspective of what is the likelihood of this being really a problem? If it is a problem, what's the actual impact? And I think we have to go beyond just impact financially. And I'll give you an example here.
Okay.
When I was at the schools, we lost computer labs at one school out of 650 for 2 weeks while we remediated an issue. Okay. Now, was there an impact to the mission? Nope. We still taught kids. Was there an impact to business goals? Nope. They still learned and they learned successfully. Was there an impact to availability? To the computers there was, but to school there was not. Was there an impact financially? No. And this is why no. And the argument is, well, your incident response team had to clean up the systems. Yes. Their cost is baked into their job. That's part of their job. It's a sunk cost. The CFO didn't view that as an expense. We didn't have to pay something. It was already absorbed. It was part. It's like saying that the fire department had to respond to something. Well, yes, we are paying them for that. Now, they could do other things, education, cleaning trucks, doing inspections, but at the end of the day, they're there for incident response. So that's why we had it. So there was no cost. The biggest risk of this situation was the fact that it was at a magnet school. Someone may have called the alderman, who would have called the mayor. And I didn't want to have to get a call from the mayor of the city of Chicago. So we got on it and we fixed it. That was the risk. It wasn't
a qualitative cost, by the way, right? That's a qualitative cost. It's like, it's not. Is it a dollar amount? It's not a dollar amount.
There wasn't a dollar amount.
Reputation.
It was reputation. So when we did it, it was like, what's the risk of this? Well, and we wanted to get the kids back in using the systems, of course. But overall, it was a non-event. Now, to the people on the ground, it was an event, but And so how do it's where do you balance that? Quantitative folks would say that was a non-event. You shouldn't worry about it. Really? Do you want a phone call from Rahm Emanuel? When he's upset, nope, absolutely not. Nope,
Right.
no.
Or a fish. You don't want to fish from him either.
Well, yeah.
Do you? So tell me now. So how does your tool set capture the qualitative stuff? That's kind of now I don't have an image for that. Like it's obviously not a number. Give me some sense of like how does the tool help you with this qualitative stuff that you're you know have educated me on the value of
Yeah,
that.
so the tool set that we built takes our top, takes all the tactical metrics that we track within the system, and it asks everyone just to give it that first glance, how bad is it? Because we're trying to find the stuff that's on fire. And every
Yeah.
time you do an analysis, and I've yet to run into an organization that doesn't have this, there's at least 10 things out of that 140 that are on fire that is like, we need to address this and talk about these top 10 items. We got a whole bunch of stuff that's okay, and we got a whole bunch of stuff that we need to do further analysis. So we actually built a quantitative assessment tool where we can run a Monte Carlo situation analysis on it to do that. But for those top items, those are the items that when you get called into court and someone's like, you had a breach, and then plaintiff's attorney subpoenas that and goes, you had 10 very obvious things that you needed to fix, and it wasn't until you did this analysis that you found it. We start chipping away at those. And then, of course, the next question is, well, what do you do about the stuff that's in the smoke? What do you do next? You run it through the quantitative system. And then you start doing your risk prioritization to that. I'm not saying that qual is the end all be all. I'm saying the qual is the first pass.
Right.
That's the first attempt. That's the first, when you run into a situation, what's going on here? Oh, that's what's going on. All right, let's go. What's the risk of it? Like, I remember one time working from home, kids were home. My wife ran out to go grocery shopping, and at the time, I think 4-year-old decided to find a marble, starts choking on it. Did I do the well, estimated life expectancy of a human being is $10 million based on the Department of Transportation. And if I let him go and if I just call someone else, maybe I'll let him evaluate this for a little while. And that'll, it'll come out in the end. The risk of me trying to do something, you know what I did is I went up to him, I flipped him over, and I whacked him really hard on his back and popped the marble out. There was what was the risk of him choking and dying? Hell, I don't know, and I didn't want to find out. Because it was obvious to flip him over and whack him on the back as hard as I could.
Right.
I'd rather deal with a broken rib than a dead kid.
Right. And I do have cybersecurity stories like that. I do.
And so, how many times have you walked into a situation where and you see something obvious? You don't have to do an analysis, you figure it out. But the thing is, it wasn't exposed. And I didn't know he was choking because I was in my office doing a call. My daughter comes in and says the youngest is choking. So it was obvious to someone else. It wasn't until I was brought in that I could figure out what was going on and was able to react and do what was needed. You can't
awesome.
always.
Yeah, I know.
You go ahead.
Yeah, and I know like with assessments, there is a very wide I don't think there's ever been an assessment where there hasn't been some kind of new information that we don't already have some kind of metric for already. There's always something that's different with every organization. So how the hell do you quantify? So that I'm adding. It's coming to me like this, how my experience, mirrors it to some extent. But the metaphor with the story about your son really got me that because I can't tell how many times you walk in, you're like, wait a minute, there's this just stuff happening here. Can we just address this first?
Right.
I'm like, I need to check a checkbox to get this assessment done or something. Like, you realize you have no policy at all for whatever would be people reusing passwords or something anyways. Wow. Well, this is really enlightening to me. And I love that you, have been able to kind of tweak this as you went. I mean, I don't know what point this was, how much of a realization or what, and then you kind of geared your development of your business, of your tools, towards that. Tell me what the future holds. I mean, are you now, you're doing something, it's in nature, kind of, let's say a little different from the way the space, the industry has been really addressing things. And how well do you think you're gonna be able to run with this? Who do you think you can address? Where do we kind of look for, watching this happen, watching this, greater thinking, this improved thinking, go flow into the industry.
Yeah,
Where else we see that?
the realization came when I was doing my literature review for the dissertation
Hmm.
of that. I read Doug Hubbard's book, I read Searson's book, and a lot of the other literature about like quantitative, and it's got to be all quant. We got to figure out how to go pure quant into it. And then when I was reading the literature and how much in the risk space people are, still, it's so bad, still using qualitative. What I found is that we're not using qualitative appropriately. And it's for the
Hmm.
binary situations. It's not for detail. And the other thing is qualitative is not allocating resources. That's the other thing. It's like, oh, it's here, so therefore you get this. No, 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 no. It's just identifying and picking out the obvious things, but you need to find a way to find the obvious things. And that is a very quick
Hmm.
tool and way to do it. Where the hammer does one thing, two things, right? It puts stuff in, it takes things out. That's what the hammer does. The drill, change the tip, it's now a drill. You change the tip, it's now a screw gun. You change the tip, it's a different, it does different things. And that's what the quant is. And that's the analogy there. Where do I think it's going? I think there's a big, huge push towards quant in an automated fashion. And I think as AI gets better and ML gets better, we can do that. But right now, I haven't seen a platform where you can just put it in your environment, let it run, and it says, yep, here's your risk. Someone's got to make a decision on stuff. Someone has to accept things. And I was working with one group just
Yeah.
last week where I was like, so we're going to have to do a HIPAA security risk assessment. And they're like, yeah, we should probably do that. Good. Do we want to engage outside counsel for that so that it can be protected? And they made a business decision to say, no, we're not going to spend the extra money on that. Okay, cool. That's fine. That is a business decision based on likelihood of one having a breach that's extensive enough to even be worthwhile, to have a breach where we are then, they are then sued by an individual, not OCR. OCR is a different story, but
Yeah.
by an individual where plaintiff's attorney would want to see the security risk assessment. They said, you know
And
what,
they
at
could
this time, we're
protect it
not
with
going to worry about
client
it.
attorney. They could probably keep it private because of client attorney privilege. Is that your point?
Right.
Like
If
what
you
they
engage
would?
outside counsel, there is
Yeah.
an increased likelihood for attorney-client privilege. And there you go. Honestly, it's not bulletproof. It's not guaranteed we're going to get the attorney-client privilege. So they didn't even want to. They're like, we're just going to do it. Let's get a first pass. Okay. So
Mhm.
basically, we're going to do first pass and find all the obvious stuff. I can tell you one of the obvious things is lack of policy. Like, we got to establish that.
Well, over and over. Oh yeah.
Right. So, like, the first thing, there, I don't need to do a quant assessment to say you have a lack of policy. This is flat out of compliance. It's it's the nuke option on a military base. We don't do
Yeah.
risk assessment for nuclear bombs on a military installation. It's not like the city of Chicago, right? If a bomb hits the city of Chicago and you live in DeKalb, you can go, well, I might be okay. If a bomb is targeted for a military installation, guess what? You're either alive or you're dead, and that's it. There's no in between.
Well, tell me who do you think which ears kind of hear this better? Is it big companies, small companies, regulated, not? I mean, because this is to me it's kind of like it's hard for regulation to address well. So who's listening the most? Who are you most likely to kind of you know you know get to kind of expand their minds a bit?
Those who are using at least our solutions and what we're doing are those with regulated industries, so
Yeah.
finance and healthcare. And it's the larger organizations because they are realizing the impact of cybersecurity to their organization. Publicly traded companies are really starting to get down that path because of what's coming out of the SEC, not
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
for the cybersecurity and the board stuff, but because since like 2013, they've been pushing contingent liabilities for cybersecurity. So contingent liabilities, the finance principle that says if it's foreseeable and you can estimate it, then you should basically have a line item. So that's warranty repairs, that's pending lawsuits, and guess what? I think cyber and SEC supports this. There's been a lot of articles from law
Mhm.
organizations that say you should plan for an incident. You should put a budget line item. Now, here's the beautiful thing. Now you can start doing ROI calculations against that. Because when I come to you and say, I want to spend this money and it's going to lower our risk by an estimated 8%, yes, I'm doing quantitative assessment here. 8% against what? 8% against that contingent liability. I'm going to reduce that contingent liability. And when you reduce a contingent liability, it goes from a liability to equity on the balance sheet. And it goes from an expense straight to the bottom of net income on the income statement. And so now when you go through the annualization, you say, yeah, but how do you measure a non-event? My contingent liability was a non-event this year. It went from an expense to net income at the end of the year. I recovered whatever that money is because it didn't happen. I did my job. What if it does happen? It was budgeted. It was planned for. It's a contingent liability. Guess what? It was foreseeable and it can be estimated. Therefore, it happened because it was foreseeable. We hit the odds. And so when the board goes, you just got hit for $100 million, they're like, yep. We had a 25% likelihood of that. It was budgeted. We only had 25 million, but we were planning on it. And guess what? We rolled the dice and it hit.
Wow, man, I think CFOs are probably going to be hard to really get their heads wrapped around this. I gave and talked to CFOs trying to explain to them where their exposure lies in cyber risk and their role. And boy, that was hard to get that. They were intrigued, but it's hard for them to understand. And I think that that's what you're going to confront in these large organizations. Even though they're listening from the risk management side and they're listening, well, board responsibility, that's going to get some ears to perk up for sure. But anyways, for me, it's like there's like a small epiphany for me here. So I really appreciate it. And, I really want to think a lot about when we're doing assessments for customers to make sure we're addressing, qualitative and quantitative equally. And, awesome for producing the tools for this, Edward, and awesome for, being willing to be on that edge. Not a lot of companies really are willing to do that. They want to, kind of meet the customer kind of where they're at the table, and sure, that's great because you got to make a sale. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to challenge, if you're not willing to push, if you're not willing to get them to expand their horizons, we're not going to make progress in the industry. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I know some of your audience is going to say, risk matrices are bad. And the qualitative is bad. Qualitative, from an academic perspective, is not just risk matrices. Qualitative is descriptive. It's perception. It's textual. And so there's a lot of research, especially in the social side of academia, that's all qualitative assessment. It's interviews and it's digesting what they say. If I ask the CFO, the CEO, the CMO what they're most concerned about, they're not going to tell me, oh, it's the $10 million of cybersecurity risk. They're going to say, I'm worried about ransomware situations, or I'm worried about this. This is what I'm concerned about. And now I have to digest, guess what? Qualitative data, qualitative information. So qualitative is not just risk matrices. Risk matrices have mathematics. They're, again, used improperly because they're not evaluating binary situations. And so we have to, as an industry, get away from the fact that qualitative data and qualitative information is bad. Qualitative information exists in academia for a reason. And so does quantitative.
Yeah, no, and then this is why I challenge you with like, hey, how are you making sure you're capturing what as your tool do that? Even though it's the interface, it's our, I'll call it, crappy interfaces of computers being totally quantitative that lack the ability to eat that data. But AI, I mean, I've been having a lot of fun with ChatGPT, by the way.
Oh yeah,
can eat that stuff a lot better. So imagine, like, I can't tell you how many times, like, oh, usually not me, it's my staff, but they're do some consulting and review stuff, and how many times they're like, go back and read through assessments. I mean, you'd think I could just like pop up the numbers and I'm ready to go. No, you got to read through the assessments to go back, and if it's a few months later and we're going to see where we're at, we're going to work with something with the client to get yourself up to speed, to wrap your head around it, because it isn't just about the numbers. Man, you were so right, and it was staring me right there in the eye, and I just wasn't quite putting it together. Anyways, well, it's been great having you, and we'll please, if we can come on board to expand into where this topic leads us or other topics. So let me let's get our episode here wrapped up. We got Josh Eklo. Thank you for producing. Edward Marchewka, founder, 3LC. Thank you for excellent work and for excellent products and your time with us. To our audience, we'll see you around next episode. Not necessarily a specific cadence every few weeks. It's just who's interesting that gets on our radar and we want to have a conversation with. And feel free to reach out to us if there's some interesting topic you want to see covered. So goodbye, y'all. Edward, again, thanks.